The sky was still painted in soft tones of morning gray when the sharp voice pierced through the calm. I had just stepped outside, coffee in hand, the cool air brushing against my skin, and the lake was perfectly still. A mirror of peace I desperately needed. The dock I had finished assembling last night sat quietly over the water, simple yet strong, blending naturally into the shoreline. It wasn't extravagant, just something I'd dreamed of for years, a personal place to train, to think, to reconnect with something real. But that serenity didn't last. She was already there, Karen, leaning against the iron railing of her porch like a queen patrolling her kingdom, arms folded and jaw set. The moment she saw me, she made her move. She walked straight up the path, like she owned it, her shoes crunching over gravel, her gaze locked on the dock like it had personally offended her. "This is going to be a problem," she said flatly. "I'm reporting it. That structure violates HOA guidelines." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just looked out at the dock, then back at her. There was a stillness in me, the kind that comes not from fear, but from certainty. I gave her a polite nod, letting her words hang in the air like the morning mist. I had nothing to prove. Not yet. She had no idea what that dock meant, no idea who I really was, and certainly no idea what was coming. The letter arrived 2 days later, slipped under my door like some passive-aggressive message from a ghost. The HOA seal was printed on the envelope in crisp black ink, its corners perfectly creased, as if even the paper was afraid to disobey regulation. I didn't open it right away. I knew what it was. Karen's voice had echoed in my ears ever since. That morning, smug and confident, as if her word alone could shape policy. When I finally did tear it open, the contents were exactly what I expected. A formal complaint. The dock was, according to them, a violation of HOA Code, Section 4.3.2. Something about unsanctioned structures along shared waterways. The letter warned that if I did not remove the dock within 7 days, I could face daily fines, legal escalation, and even involvement of city compliance officers. They had even attached a poorly printed photo of my dock, taken from the bushes, like it was evidence in a criminal investigation. "This isn't personal," the letter stated in bold type. "This is about community standards." I almost laughed. Of course it was personal. Karen had been itching for control ever since she landed on the HOA board, and now she thought she had found her chance. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter flat before me, the mug of now cold coffee beside it. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to send one email and end this entire game in minutes. One call, one forwarded resume, and they'd realize the ridiculousness of it all. But I didn't. Not yet. Let them escalate. Let them believe they were holding the leash. I'd fought bigger battles than this. Karen didn't know it, but I had stood before Olympic committees, national architects, even government panels. This was just a neighborhood, and I was just getting started. The days that followed were quieter than I expected, but not in a peaceful way. There was a particular kind of silence in the neighborhood, the kind that came when people were watching, through curtains and whispering across hedges. Karen had wasted no time. She rallied the usual suspects, the self-appointed sidewalk inspectors, the mailbox height enforcers, the rulers of recycling bin placement. Her version of the story spread faster than fact. I had built an illegal structure, a safety hazard, a danger to the serene aesthetic of the community. More notices arrived, each one more stern than the last. Violation, fine, threat. The language grew bolder, the typeface darker, as if font weight could intimidate me. Karen's hand was in every word. I didn't respond, not directly. I started gathering my own documents. Permits from the city water board, signed engineering approvals, site evaluations, soil testing reports. I pulled out a thick folder from the top shelf of my study, labeled Private Projects. It held the original plans for the dock, precise, regulated, flawless. The kind of work that had gotten me invited to international forums, that had passed scrutiny by Olympic venue planners and national safety commissions. There were photos on the wall. Me, standing alongside gold medalists at a whitewater track in London. A framed email hung above my desk, congratulating me for leading the design on the world's first modular flood-resilient kayak arena. I hadn't flaunted it before. In this neighborhood, prestige was viewed as arrogance. Simplicity was celebrated. But simplicity didn't mean smallness. And silence didn't mean weakness. I kept a journal those days, not for emotional reasons, but for legal ones. Each letter, each overheard insult, each time Karen passed by my house a little too slowly. I logged everything. Preparation was something I was trained in. This wasn't a dispute. This was groundwork. One evening I was on my porch when she passed again. "You know this will end with you tearing it down, right?" she said, arms folded. "I'm aware of the process," I replied calmly. "You think being clever means you'll win?" "I don't think anything yet," I said. "I just follow protocol." She scoffed and walked off, but I could see it in her shoulders. Uncertainty. She expected me to react, to plead, to panic. But I wasn't made of panic. I was made of design, of precision, of patience. At night, I stared at the blueprint rolled out on my desk. It was more than a doc. It was a symbol of work, of discipline, of knowing how to build something that lasts against pressure. Karen had no idea that the structure she was so intent on tearing down had been modeled with the same technology used in Olympic tracks, reinforced for impact, environmentally optimized, and engineered to survive floods. I could end it now. A simple reveal and this would all collapse around her. But I wanted the moment to land, not out of ego, but to remind people like Karen that not everything they see is the whole story. Some of us spend years perfecting our craft in silence. Let her keep pushing. I wasn't worried. I was ready. The emergency HOA meeting was called for a Thursday evening, just before sunset. The timing was strategic, early enough to catch everyone before dinner, late enough to breed drama. Folding chairs were set in uneven, rows on the community green space, the kind usually reserved for block parties and Easter egg hunts. But tonight, it looked like a trial. A small wooden podium stood at the front, the HOA banner clipped behind it, and in the front row sat Karen, armed with a binder so thick it could have been mistaken for legal scripture. Neighbors gathered in quiet clusters. I noticed glances in my direction, a mix of sympathy, curiosity, and avoidance. No one approached me. Not yet. They were waiting. For the show, Karen took the podium first. She didn't smile. She never did when she believed she was in control. "As you all know," she began, voice projecting with performative professionalism, "this meeting concerns a clear violation of our community's shoreline regulations. A resident has constructed a dock without approval, without transparency, and more importantly, without concern for our shared property rights." She held up a stack of printed HOA guidelines, fanned them out like she was dealing cards in a courtroom. "This dock sets a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, what next? Boathouses, marina lights? This is a peaceful neighborhood, not a public launch zone." She looked at me. "I recommend that the board issue a formal removal order. If the structure isn't gone in 5 days, legal channels should be pursued." The murmurs began. A few nods, a few furrowed brows. Karen stepped back with a smug sense of finality. Her performance was done. I stood slowly. No rush, no theatrics, just certainty. I walked to the podium, unrolling a set of large format documents. I'd carried in a long tube, precise, scaled, signed. Then, without saying a word, I laid them across the table facing the audience. Dock schematics, safety compliance certificates, and a federal permit issued under my name. "My name is Elena Reyes," I said, voice even, firm. "I'm a licensed civil engineer specializing in aquatic infrastructure. I've designed flood control waterways across the country, contributed to post-disaster reconstruction zones, and led the Olympic watercourse design team for the last 3 international games." I let the words hang. No arrogance, just fact. "This dock is not only compliant, it was engineered using impact-resistant modular systems, environmentally integrated pilings, and non-disruptive shoreline anchoring methods. It has been vetted, approved, and documented." I turned slightly, and "I'd like to introduce someone." From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward, button-down shirt, clipboard in hand. He introduced himself as the senior inspector from the city's Water Safety and Zoning Division. "I've reviewed the structure personally," he said. "It meets or exceeds all local and federal requirements. It's safer than any dock I've reviewed this year. There is no violation." Silence. Karen's jaw stiffened. She blinked twice, looked down at her binder, then back up at me. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How to spin this, how to salvage the humiliation, but nothing came out. She just stood there, rigid, like a statue no one admired. A low murmur passed through the crowd. Someone clapped, then someone else. Not loud, not celebratory, just enough to shift the balance in the air. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just gathered my documents, nodded once, and stepped away from the podium. Karen remained frozen as car. I walked past the rows of neighbors. Some made eye contact. A few looked down. One man whispered, "Did she really say Olympics?" Another replied, "Yep, 3 of them." Back at my seat, I exhaled. Not relief, not triumph, just stillness. The kind that follows when you've carried something heavy and finally put it down. Karen didn't speak again that evening. The meeting ended in quiet disbandment. The board, too embarrassed to proceed. The dock would stay. But more than that, so would the truth. The official letter from the HOA came the following Monday. It was printed on the same cold stationery as the violation notice weeks earlier, but this time the language was different. No threats, no fines, no deadlines. Just a formal withdrawal of the complaint, citing new information provided and a review of the inspection. They appreciated my cooperation, though I suspected that line had been hard for someone to type. Karen didn't speak to me. I saw her once, watering her garden without looking up, pretending the world hadn't shifted under her feet. The binder never appeared again. Whatever grip she'd had on the neighborhood had loosened. People were beginning to see that the loudest person wasn't always the most informed. Neighbors who once kept their distance now offered polite waves. A few approached quietly. One elderly man I'd never spoken to stopped while walking his dog. "You built that dock yourself?" "With a crew," I said. "But I designed it." He nodded. "I've never seen anything like it. Real nice work." Another neighbor, a young mom, thanked me for handling it with grace. That word stayed with me, because I had been tempted, not to belittle Karen, not to attack, but to win loudly, to show everyone what she didn't know and how little she understood. But that wasn't why I'd stood firm. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about reminding people that quiet strength exists, even if it doesn't demand a spotlight. I walked the dock that evening, barefoot, letting the wood hold my weight like it was part of me. The lake was calm again. No ripples, no noise, just stillness. The dock hadn't changed, but everything around it had. Not because I fought louder, because I stood longer, because I trusted the work behind me to speak when I didn't have to. And when it finally did, it spoke clearly. The sky burned gold as I pushed off from the dock, the kayak slicing gently through the water's glassy surface. The lake held the warmth of the day, quiet now, untouched. Each stroke of the paddle was smooth, steady, rhythmic, like breathing. I wasn't training. I wasn't testing new materials. I was just moving, letting the silence speak. I thought about how quickly people form opinions, how power in the hands of the wrong person becomes noise, how silence in the hands of the right one becomes strength. Karen had judged the dock by what she saw: planks, posts, an outsider's idea of disruption. She didn't ask what it was. She never asked who I was, but that was always the mistake. The truth is, people like her don't expect quiet people to push back. They don't expect restraint to be a choice. They confuse patience for weakness, modesty for submission. They forget that water wears down stone not by force, but by persistence. That calm doesn't mean surrender. It means control. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water. I paused in the middle of the lake, letting the kayak drift, the dock a silhouette behind me. I smiled, just a little. The current doesn't need to shout to shape the riverbed. It just needs time and direction, and the courage to flow exactly where it's meant to.